Hello everyone, this is David, and today I'm going to be bringing you a video on basic instrument flying. Um, so the first thing we want to cover in instrument flight are what these gauges do, what the six-pack is all about, right? I'm sure everyone's heard that terminology, and if you've been flying flight sim for a while, or a pilot in the real world, I'm sure you know exactly what these gauges do, but you may not understand how to use them properly in instrument flight to help you keep the airplane stable. Most people, at least those a little uninformed about IFR, would say that your primary instrument for pitch and bank would be your artificial horizon here. That is actually untrue. Your primary instrument for pitch would be your airspeed indicator and your altimeter. Your supporting instruments would be your VSI and your artificial horizon. For bank, your primary is your directional gyro. This is backed up by your turn and bank, or turn coordinator, I should say, and your artificial horizon. So if I wanted to initiate a climb, let's say climb up to 3,200 feet, I would pitch the aircraft for an airspeed. So I'm going to pitch the aircraft for about 110 knots. All right, so I'll pitch the nose up till I reach that 110 and then keep the airplane there. Won't quite go all the way up, as I don't really need to for the demonstration of this. Also, the airplane climbs fine at 120, but the point remains the same, that you want to basically set an airspeed for your climb and keep it there, and that's how you would control your pitch. If you notice, I'm in a descent, I've stopped the descent, and I've now pushed the nose back down, starting a descent. If you notice, the VSI tends to trend a little bit behind the airplane. That's perfectly normal. This is why it's a secondary instrument instead of a primary instrument, because the VSI lags behind slightly. If you make smooth corrections, it doesn't lag behind that much, but it lags behind because it has a calibrated leak in it. The calibrated leak is actually how the VSI works. I won't go, there's plenty of videos talking about how the instruments work, so I'm not going to go into those specifics on this video. This is mainly just talking about basic instrument flight. All right, so now let's say I want to set up to make a turn. I'm going to turn to a heading of 210. All right, I'm going to do this at a standard rate. All turns in instrument flight are done at either standard rate or half standard rate. Standard rate being 3 degrees per second, or you can just put your wing right on this mark here. Half standard rate would be 1.5 degrees per second, or your wings right here between the two white marks. All right, and then we're going to come around to a heading of 120. Or 210, sorry. All right, so we'll roll out, wings level on 210. Same as with normal flight. Obviously, when you put the airplane in a turn, you have to have a little bit of back pressure or you will lose altitude. So, now let's say you were trying to figure out how do you calculate out what a standard rate turn is at 3 degrees per second. Well, the most simple math is you take your airspeed, divide it by 10, and add 5. So right here at 120 knots, divide by 10, so 12 degrees plus 5 equals 17 degrees of bank to have a standard rate turn. We know this. We have to increase our bank angle to keep that 3 degrees per second turn, because as our airspeed increases, our turn radius grows. So in order to keep that standard rate turn, we have to increase our bank. So let's say we're doing it at 100, we would have 15 degrees of bank. All right, so that kind of covers some of the basics of instrument flight. Now, let's go ahead and load up an approach here. So we're going to do the Rnav 06 LPV into Nantucket. So I go ahead and fix my altitude here. Looked away for a second. That's the other thing in instrument flight, is having a good instrument scan. Now I will say that doing instrument flight in the sim is actually sometimes a little bit harder, at least control-wise, than doing it in the actual airplane. The reason for this is you can't really feel what the airplane's doing or the controls on the airplane. You know, if you were flying the airplane, you could actually feel, okay, it's out of trim. It's not. Here, you're just kind of watching your altimeter and trying to set your controls neutral and kind of seeing what you got. But it's an excellent trainer for actual IFR because you can do so many procedures in a short amount of time, and also you're not burning aviation fuel, which can be pretty expensive. All right, so I've got the simulator paused here just so I can take some time and talk about this. This is our approach plate, and I'm going to talk about an approach plate briefing and what you want to cover in that. So first off, we'll want to verify that we're on the approach that we want. So we want the Rnav 6. All right, we'll come over here and look at this information. This is not too pertinent for us. What we're mainly looking for is our approach course. So we'll set this to 061, and obviously I could do this with the sim going, but I also wants to be able to take the time to instruct it. All right, we should have already, before we even left our original airport or departure airport, we should have already been familiar with our runway lengths and airport elevations, weather. That's the acronym WK craft, or weather, known delays, or sorry, not WK craft, WK raft, runway lengths, approaches, having a bit of a blank here. Hang on just a second. Okay, sorry. So runway lengths, alternates, fuel requirements, and takeoff and performance data. How to look that up? That's anyway. Just drawing a blank. Anyway, so we want to have all that available to us. We want to, briefed all that. Obviously, for alternates, you would look at your 1, 2, 3 rule. So an hour before to an hour after, you have to have 2,000-foot ceilings and 3 miles visibility. In order to not have to file an alternate. For fuel, we have to be able to fly to our destination, to our alternate, in 45 minutes after that. The takeoff performance data, just like you would on a normal flight, you would run through your performance charts and make sure the airplane can get in and out of the runways. Obviously, runway lengths, which is what we're talking about up here. You would want to know that your airplane can get into the airport before you start the approach. Known delays. So basically, let's say we were doing a flight between Chicago O'Hare and LaGuardia. LaGuardia has a ground stop, and so basically we would just make ourselves aware of that. And obviously the weather, which was what we're talking about there. So once again, the acronym is WK raft, not WK craft, and that was what was messing me up. I was trying to figure out what the C was. Anyway, so we would review this before the flight. All right, so our touchdown zone elevation is 38, approach airport elevation is 47. So what TDZ is basically how high it is in the touchdown zone, what the elevation is there. This stuff is mainly talking about, if it's really cold out, you would change your minimums, etc. This is providing all your frequencies. So while you're en route, you would get the ATIS, you'd be talking to Boston Approach Control. They would switch you to Nantucket Tower eventually. Ground control you'd put in the backup and have that ready for when you get on the ground. Clearance delivery, you don't really need it in the air. That's just from the ground Unicom to talk to an FBO there. All right, so this right here is this MALSIF. It is the type of runway the lighting and the approach lighting that you expect to see there. All right, so getting into the actual approach brief, what you would do is you would, read out this. You'd read out your approach course. If you hadn't, you would go ahead and get these frequencies set in out ahead of time. You don't want to wait till the last minute to start your cellular frequencies, because then that can lead to you getting behind the airplane. So looking at the approach here, all right, I'm going to start this at the fix of Balmy. The reason for that is, or I could start it here at these with the feeder fixes, right, at AFIS. The reason I would start this is because I don't have to do this procedure turn. Not that doing that is really that big of a deal, but you really kind of want to avoid, you want to do the thing with the least amount of turns. So if you could avoid the procedure turn, you would. The reason you don't have to do a procedure turn with these feeder fixes is because right here, NOPT, no procedure turn. All right, this right here is saying the altitude you have to be at. Above that, you could at or above that. You don't want to be below it. You can be above it though. For that segment of the approach. Same with here. This is saying your approach course. Then over here, we have what's called the MSA, and that is set off of 25 miles from our runway there. So what that is that is going to give you obstacle clearance of 1,000 feet over non-mountainous areas. So any obstacles you crane, they'll give you 1,000 feet above that. This right here is more than likely why it's 1,500. Obviously, Nantucket is not a really tall place, but you do have some relatively tall towers there at 478 feet MSL. All right, coming down to our profile view. So how I would brief this is we're doing the Rnav 06 into Nantucket. The approach course is 061. Frequencies are set. We'll cross UFIC at or above 2,300. From there, we can descend down to 1,700 to Craigie, which is going to be our glide slope intercept because we're doing this as a LPV approach. And from there, we will continue down to our LPV minimums of 238 and 4,000 RVR. So this gives us, because we know our TDZ is 38, this gives us 200 feet above the ground level and about 3/4 of a mile visibility. All right, should we go miss, climb straight ahead to 1,800 to Wavis and hold. So we can come over here to our missed approach fix, and we can take a look at this. So this is an Rnav approach, meaning that your holds, your missed holds, are in mile lengths. So they're 4 miles. If this was a VOR localizer ILS, it would be 1 minute legs for GA aircraft at relatively low altitudes. Looking at this, I would enter this hold as a teardrop. So basically, you come across at 30 degrees beyond or behind that 114, so about a 084, and you fly that for 1 minute. Then you turn inbound, and then you just fly outbound 4 miles, start your turn, and fly inbound. And you just sit there and fly that while waiting for further clearance or trying to approach again. So let's say we did not have LPV. We would use our LNAV, MDA. So the difference between an MDA and a DA, So DA is decision altitude. So once we reach 238, if we do not have runway contact, we must go around. All right. With the MDA, we can descend to 380 and hold there. Obviously, at a certain point, you would not be able to make the descent using normal maneuvers, which is one of the required things to be able to continue the approach and descend below minimums. So this right here, this little V, is a visual descent point. So 0.9 miles from the runway is when they say you'd be able to make that descent using normal maneuvers. If you don't reach breakout by your VDP or have runway contact by your VDP, you need to go missed. The A, B, C, D up here refers to the categories of aircraft. So for us, we would be probably a B category aircraft because we are above a certain speed. So the difference where that makes a difference is not so much on any of these, but it does make a difference for our circling minimums. So basically, let's say we wanted to shoot this approach. The other approach was inoperative or something like that, or we wanted to land this runway because of winds. This north-south runway, I'm guessing, or relatively north-south runway at Nantucket. So we wanted to land this runway. We would come in to 1.5 miles because of category B, that is our circling. We get inside that, and then provided we had visual contact with the runway, we would start our turn, staying within 1.5 miles of the center of the airport, and come in and land on that runway. All right, so now that we've kind of talked about that and talked about the stuff that's on the plate, we will continue the approach. Now, a normal approach briefing would not be that long, but I'm also trying to instruct some on the plate. An approach briefing really would be very simple. We would do the Rnav 6 into Nantucket. We would, read out our approach course, radio frequencies, our set. Then we would come down here across UFIC at or above 2300, or depending on these points, Ocala Athens at or above 2300 to UFIC. Cross UFIC at or above 2300. From there, descend to 1700 to Craigie. From there, I'll descend down to my minimums of 238 and 4000 RBR. Should I go missed, climb to 1800, direct wave us and hold. My hold entry for this would be a teardrop. I would get the course back to 084 and then go from there. And that would be pretty much my approach brief. So go ahead and load that. And let's see here. Actually, I did not load that the way I wanted to. So I don't want to load it via vectors. I want to load it via Bomley. The reason is vectors, if I was on ATC vectors, I would be given courses to fly to the final approach course by ATC. For this, obviously I'm not using ATC, so I'll have to kind of navigate there myself. So we'll go ahead and unpause the sim, and now I will actually fly the approach. Alright, so I'm looking for a heading of 357. So start my standard rate turn over to a heading of 357. Now I'm going to leave my needle here on 061. Mainly because I have no reason to change it. I can look up here and see what the course I need to fly is, and same with the 430. I can see the course that I needed to fly. There's no reason to set that. It's not like a VOR where it will totally screw it up if you don't have the OBS set correctly. Because you're not flying a radial, you're just flying a course line. Alright, coming around to 357. And I've slowed my turn rate down just a little bit so I don't blow past it. And I'm watching my altitude coming in. Now for this, I could have done more than likely, just from my location, a direct entry at JustFlight, or whatever the initial fix is. I could have done direct entry there and just went ahead and did the approach, but I just kind of wanted to show everybody how the feeder fixes work. For time's sake, I'm going to speed the sim up a little bit and do my best to maintain altitude and course line with the sim sped up here. So in IFR, small corrections can elicit big changes. As you can see, I'm getting off my altitude there, but I am 8 times speed currently. So okay, and actually I was wrong on that. We've not. I could actually do a direct entry, but that's still at JustFlight. Alright, I'm 5 miles out. In just a second, I will put the sim back to normal speed and try to keep my altitude under control here. Alright, and sim going back to normal speed. Alright, let's go ahead and recover that. Alright, so HTC would probably have me on an altitude, probably would have me cleared down to 2,300 feet at this point, this close to the fix. As it is published, 2,300 feet. So I'm just going to go ahead and actually just take the opportunity, since I'm down a couple hundred feet, to descend down to 2,300 feet for the to start the approach. Alright, looking for 330 now. I'm watching over here to get that heading, and looking up here also I can get that heading. And just set either standard rate or half standard rate. Turn, or like a standard rate will get you there a little bit quicker. Alright, there's 2,300 feet. So we'll maintain that on that 330 heading. One thing I will say, I do really like X-Plane. I think it's a great platform, but the cloud rendering engine, or weather rendering engine, really sucks in this sim. It doesn't really give you great IFR. It has a few glitches in it. You'll break out for like a couple seconds and see clear skies and then be back in it, and it's just kind of completely unrealistic in that regard. But when it does work, it works really well. My main issue with X-Plane compared to Prepared or any, well, that's about it, sim-wise, is Prepared that does general aviation. Besides Aerofly, and they're not really set up for weather very good either. My main issue with it is the cloud draw distance, regardless of your add-on you're using. Say for XEnviro, you get 30 miles cloud draw distance around the airplane, which may sound like a lot, but if you're in an airliner and you're at altitude, it looks really stupid having a circle of clouds around the plane. Or if you load like a scattered layer, you'll see you'll have like clouds above the plane but no clouds on the horizon. It looks really stupid as well, and you'll see that even on the airport. And I'm not sure why Laminar doesn't fix that. They talk about trying to have a realistic sim. That's really highly unrealistic. I understand performance considerations, but you are loading 2D cloud textures. It's not like you're loading, volumetric clouds. If Prepared 3D can manage it, or FSX can manage 110-mile draw distance on software or on code that's coming from 2006, that machines in 2006 could run, I think we can probably handle it in 2018. All right, so next course is coming to 060, and we'll start that turn over to that. Once I'm established inbound on my next leg, I will descend down to the 1700 that's published on the plate there. Yeah, there's just a few little things like that that I don't really get why Laminar tends to ignore, kind of like seasons. You know, they're like, I don't quite get why they would choose to ignore kind of blatant issues in the sim that exist. All right, so coming inbounds to that, I'm on course, or I'm on my course line at least. And so now I can go ahead and once we get on 060, go ahead and start that descent down to 1,700 feet. Come past my course just a little bit here. I actually overcorrected a little too much, and I could bring it on down to 1,700 now. So like I was talking about, small changes make a big difference. Normally on an approach, 5 to 10 degrees tends to be enough heading wise to elicit the change you need. Sometimes it can be as little as like 2 degrees. Small corrections make a big difference in instrument flight, coming through 2,300 to go. So this being a non-precision approach, even though I have vertical guidance, I do like to configure about 2 miles before the FAF, or final approach fix, which is Craigie. So right now I'm going to go ahead and pull the power back on the arrow and set about 20 inches for just a second here, and so I can get the airplane within gear speed. All right, 2 miles, that's good. And watch that altitude. And stay at 1,700. And bring the power back up just a little bit here. And I'm within the flap arc, so flaps coming to 10 now. All right, so with all that drag hanging out, go ahead and bring up the prop a little bit and get back on my 060 course. Looking away, getting all the gear set and everything, and distract you a little bit and get you off. I do have 3 green, so I'm good for that. And now I just want to maintain that 1,700 till I hit Craigie. Alright, we'll go ahead and bring the prop full forward. Alright, there's my glide slope coming in. Going to set about 30 inches here, 25 to 30. And not quite at my point yet, so I need to maintain my altitude. Getting off a little bit on that. Not too familiar with the turbo arrow power settings. That's the only bad thing about doing this approach in this airplane. The reason I chose to do it is it has a pretty basic save for the Garmin 750. It's a pretty basic IFR setup, which is what I'm familiar with, what I used to instructing with. I do instruct in the arrow, but our arrow is non-turbocharged. So for this, I'd usually use about 20 inches of manifold pressure, but using those power settings in this airplane has proved to be not working. So trying to find power settings that work is just kind of a playing with it thing. All right, so approach course is 060. I'm on my glide slope, and I am now coming back in on my localizer there. Get the airplane trimmed here. It's only, the nose is wanting to come down pretty bad. So there's that 25 inches, see what that gives me. And we'll recapture that, and we're just going to continue coming down to 238. And let's try 060, see what that gives me. And let's try 055 and see what that gives. Okay, getting off on my vertical speed, and have to correct that back down. I try to fly all my approaches by hand Obviously, I'm not using autopilot for this. This is not a coupled approach. I even do this in the JetSim sim, mainly to help maintain proficiency, and also because what's the fun of watching the autopilot have all the fun in the sim? There's no point in having my computer simulate another computer flying a simulated computer flying a simulated plane. There's just no point in that. So there we go. Got it set up. Got about 100 feet to go till minimums. I do have ground contact out ahead of me. Get back on that 060. Get back on my altitude. Okay, I've got ground contact. But am I going to see the runway? Alright, I've got the runway in sight. Power's coming back. Flaps are coming to 20 degrees. And obviously, if the runway lights were on, it would make this a little bit easier. And I want about 90 coming over the threshold in this airplane. Alright, last check. Gear is down. And power's coming back. And we're just going to hold it off. Alright, now as you can see, this airplane was way out of trim. I tended to want to drop the nose pretty bad. So, and the other huge thing I have to say that I really truly hate in X-Plane is the really horrible ground handling. It is extremely overly sensitive compared to what you would see in the real airplane. But that tends to be a problem with most sims. Alright folks, well I hope you have enjoyed the video, and I'm not quite sure what's up with the taxi lights being in this kind of like in the taxiway. Normally they would be off to the side. With this being an Orbix airport, I would think that it would be correct, so maybe in Nantucket's kind of weird and they put them on the pavement, but that kind of doesn't make much sense. Anyway, if you have any questions, post them below. Yeah, I know the approach wasn't perfect, but I am human, and I do make mistakes, so I'll be the first to admit that, and always trying to learn and improve. So if you got some tips, throw them out there. I'm more than happy to learn from somebody else as well. Going to my background, for those of you who don't know, I'm a CFI, CFII, and MEI, and this is what I do for a career. Trying to get to the airlines, trying to get to that 1,500 hours to get, a regional airline job. So, yeah. So if you don't know, obviously CFI is flight instructor. CFII means instrument instructor. So I can teach instrument flight, and MEI means multi-engine instructor. I've done one video where I talked about multi-engine aerodynamics, and eventually we'll bring some multi-engine lessons into this channel. We will do some more IFR lessons, talk about doing ILS and VOR approaches, unusual attitude recovery, those sort of things. I will say that, like I was talking about earlier, the sim can actually be a little bit harder to fly approaches in, mainly because it is so sensitive and you don't have the feedback of the controls to tell you the airplane's in or out of trim. Normally you have that weight, that feeling of the airplane, which is extremely important. And in the sim, you're just kind of completely numb to it. With that said, hope everyone has enjoyed the video. And if you haven't already, please subscribe and post any comments below. Thanks for watching.